Yesterday, the Missouri Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, announced that he was suing Jackson County. He joins us for his first interview on this topic here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Mr. Attorney General, good morning. Thanks for being here. And let's just start off with the lawsuit and why you decided to file it.
Well, Pete, thanks for having me on. This is all about protecting Missouri taxpayers from illegal and unconstitutional overtaxation. This assessment process has been a dysfunctional nightmare, and the basic statutory requirements were not met. The sad part about it is, while working Missouri families are suffering, the assessor's office excuse is basically that they didn't have enough staff, couldn't get the job done. Well, that is unacceptable when you're talking about some of the worst inflation in this nation's history that's taking dollars out of working Missouri families' pockets, and now you've got government agents overtaxing without any vote of the people and in violation of state statute. So this lawsuit's important to protect those working Missouri families from overtaxation in Jackson County.
So what does it mean for the Jackson County taxpayer who has been filing their appeals, who has taxes that they owe in 11 days? What does it mean for them today, right now, as they get out the door, they go to work, and they make money to pay back to the county? What are they supposed to be thinking and doing?
Well, help is on the way. We're going to get this problem solved. We're going to make sure that the property is assessed at the right amount and that the proper notice and administrative remedies are provided. Look, there's three major issues here. Number one, that the taxpayers did not get proper notice about the increase in valuation. There was a 30% increase across the board, sometimes up to a 100% increase. And so the county owed the taxpayers notice of that and a process by which the taxpayers could appeal to include a physical inspection, because that's the other requirement that wasn't met by the county. There's supposed to be physical inspections of the property, and if the property owner disagrees with the assessed valuation, they can request an interior inspection. Because if the taxing authority says, well, look, your house is worth 30% more this year, but you actually, say, took off, destroyed a third-car garage or something and took it out of your house without a physical inspection, the assessor wouldn't know that. And so that's why the physical inspection requirement is there, and that was not conducted. What the county did was outsource this to a group that just looked at a plat map and said, well, across the board, these should all be worth more. Finally, there was no real process to appeal the decisions that the assessor was making. The notices didn't go out. The notices were deficient, and the administrative process was a complete dysfunctional mess. And this harms working Missouri families, so help is on the way. Lawsuit has been filed, and we're going to get this thing figured out and get it fixed.
So what now? I mean, the lawsuit gets filed. I know you can't control the courts, but what is the next step here for Jackson County taxpayers to, be looking at and be focused on as they follow along?
Well, it's important that the taxpayers, you've got under state statute, you have to pay your taxes. Even if you disagree with them, you have to pay them under protest. So make sure you're noting in the protest all the issues that you faced in your evaluations. And then the next thing that's going to happen is, as part of the lawsuit, we're going to gather evidence, and we're going to be reaching out to taxpayers across Jackson County to assist us in that process. But we're going to gather all the evidence, and then we're going to go to court and put that evidence on, and the court's going to craft a remedy that's going to fix the problem. And so help is on the way. Unfortunately, as you noted, the judicial process does not move as quickly as we would all like, but I want taxpayers to know that we're standing with them to ensure that their hard-earned dollars are theirs and not being illegally taken by government officials with a tax and spend frenzy.
I don't want to get too far ahead of the story here, Mr. Attorney General, but what happens because you've got the mill levies that are all set by schools and cities and things like that, and if these assessments are thrown out, that obviously throws off the mill levy rate potentially and the monies that these cities and schools are bringing in, right? So what's the end game with that potentially?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, it's a ripple in the pond effect. When one part of the process fails, when the assessor doesn't do their job, it harms all the other levying districts across the county. And look, here's the deal. When the valuations are made, each taxing authority has the ability to adjust their levy accordingly. So everyone should have been on notice about this problem. And if no one spoke up, that makes the problem worse. Luckily, thousands of Jackson County residents reached out to my office and put my office on notice that this was going on, which allowed us to gather enough evidence on the front end and work with the state tax commission to be able to file this suit. We wish we would have gotten to it sooner, but at the end of the day, when the county assessor is not sending out the proper notice and is hiding the fact that they're not doing the in-person inspections, that hampers the investigation. So luckily the auditor stepped in and has made some preliminary findings and has shared those yesterday. And again, we have had a real inpouring of voices from Jackson County alerting us to this issue, which has allowed us to move forward. And I'll tell you, we're going to get it fixed.
You know, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of regular people on Main Street. I mean, if they don't pay their taxes, they're in violation of the law. Something happens to them. There are legal ramifications. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic here, but if there is evidence that people within the county willingly and knowingly broke the law, will there be a legal price to pay for individuals in this case, potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, where public officials knowingly violate a public duty, they expose themselves to civil liability. And where you've got taxpayers that harm, they're going to have remedies for that. But I would also point out that this whole mess is Exhibit A in the case for reform. This property tax assessment and setting the levies for the local taxing districts, it is so opaque. It is so confusing. The average working person doesn't understand how this works. And how could they? Most assessors and attorneys don't understand how it works. So we have overly complicated a system that allows for an increase in taxation without any input of the people or without any clarity on how it works. And again, when you've got a working family that all of a sudden their tax bill is 30% higher, people are going to lose their homes. I mean, this is a serious crisis, especially in this time of, Biden's rampant inflation. And so that's why this lawsuit's so important. We're going to push it forward with as much haste as allowed under the due process, the confines of due process within the judicial system. But we are confident in our ultimate success on the merits to save these taxpayers their hard-earned dollars.
Yeah, so this will be heard by a judge, sometime in the new year? Is that when this process would take its next step?
Yeah, we believe so. We believe that shortly after the new year, and again, we are gathering evidence now, and we'll continue to do that. And as soon as we have sufficient evidence, we will ask for a hearing at court, and we'll start asking the judge to craft a remedy here. And I think some of that is money back in the taxpayers' pockets, but I think some of it needs to be a court order that implements some short-term structural reform. But again, we're going to put all pen to paper on all of this and get it to the General Assembly as Exhibit A as to why we've got to change the way we do this and look at eliminating the personal property tax in Missouri.
Really? Okay, so that's something that's on the table as far as you're concerned. All right. What do you say to Frank White put out a statement saying that this is nothing but political for you, you're playing political games, and that's all this is really about?
Well, that's embarrassing, and I tell you, that is not what I've heard from the hundreds of working Missouri families across Jackson County who have been ripped off by their county government.
And you've heard, I imagine, from Democrats, Republicans, Independents. I mean, you're not fighting here on behalf of Jackson County Republicans. You are fighting on behalf of Jackson County residents, just to be clear.
Absolutely. Every Jackson County personal property taxpayer has been ripped off as part of this process because, again, the astronomical increase in the assessed valuations with no notice or chance to appeal it. I mean, the whole process, not only is it opaque, but it's completely unfair the way they've – that's why we've got to get it fixed in Jackson County and look at structural reform across the state.
All right, last thing, Mr. Attorney General, I got to ask you about, of course, the breaking news last night, the Colorado State Supreme Court deciding that Donald Trump cannot be on their ballot on Super Tuesday. From a legal perspective, what do you make of this, and how do you see it going from here?
It's complete garbage. The United States Supreme Court needs to step in and fix this. This is what happens in third world countries. January 6th was not an insurrection. The Capitol building is a public building, and people have the ability to access public buildings to seek redress, petition their government from redress. And so it was never an insurrection. The left-wing media has called it that in order to tee up things like this to go after politicians they don't like President Trump. It's completely unfair, and it potentially deprives Missourians of the ability to have a free, fair election, because if you've got one state that is not even considering a candidate that's on the ballot in Missouri, that's enormously problematic nationwide.
All right. He's the Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, on KCMO. We'll be talking plenty as this lawsuit moves forward, Mr. Attorney General. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Pete. Merry Christmas to you and your listeners.
Merry Christmas as well. That is Andrew Bailey. Good to have him on KCMO Talk Radio.